They didn't simply leave a scar, they slowly broke down the one person who is willing to go to the ends of the earth for them. When you give a narcissist everything, your loyalty, your energy, your trust, even the deepest parts of yourself, you become far more than a partner. You become a source of emotional stability they depend on. But here is the truth they never want you to see. The moment they chose to destroy you, they also created consequences for themselves. They may believe they won because they walked away, crushed your confidence, or left you questioning your own worth. But psychologically, something much deeper has happened. By pushing away the person who offered them genuine stability, they can trigger a chain reaction of 6 internal wounds that may follow them for a very long time. These reactions are often invisible from the outside. Nobody sees them. Nobody hears the thoughts behind the mask. Yet they can shape how that person experiences every relationship that comes after you. They traded real safety for a temporary feeling of power, and that trade can become extremely costly. But before we look at what happens inside them, you need to stop and face something honestly. Think about the exhaustion. Think about the confusion. Think about that empty feeling you carried after giving more and more while receiving less and less. If you ever felt like a shell of the person you used to be, ask yourself one difficult question: what parts of myself did I have to silence just to keep them comfortable? Think about the warning signs you ignored. Think about the boundaries you allowed them to cross because you were afraid of what would happen if you finally said no. That answer matters. It may matter more than every "I love you" they ever whispered and every cruel word they ever threw at you. And this is where your freedom begins. You have to understand that what looked like strength, confidence, superiority, or complete control was often only a fragile outer image. Behind that image can be a person who is deeply dependent on outside validation to feel secure. The mask may look powerful, but it is not invincible. Eventually, reality begins pressing against it. When the process of devaluing you begins, it can feel deeply personal. You may wonder what you did wrong. You may replay conversations again and again. You may ask yourself why someone who once seemed so impressed by your kindness suddenly treats that same kindness as if it means nothing. But the shift is not always about your value. It can be about what your stability represents to them. In the beginning, your calmness may have felt comforting. Your loyalty may have felt safe. Your patience may have filled a gap they could not fill for themselves. You offered qualities they desperately wanted around them. Yet with time, your consistency can become uncomfortable because it reflects their own inconsistency. Your emotional steadiness can expose their inner disorder. Your loyalty can remind them how unstable they feel inside. And when someone cannot tolerate that reflection, they may try to destroy the mirror instead of facing what it reveals. This is the part many people struggle to understand. They can become uncomfortable with the fact that they actually need another person. Dependence can feel like weakness to someone who has built their identity around control. So instead of admitting, "I need this person," they may unconsciously turn the relationship into a power struggle. Your love starts looking like a leash, or your care starts feeling like pressure. Your questions about communication become an attack. Your desire for honesty becomes drama. Suddenly, the warmth that once felt like home becomes cold distance. The person who once wanted your attention may begin acting as though your presence is an inconvenience. They stop responding with appreciation and start responding with contempt. Why? Because contempt creates emotional distance. It allows them to convince themselves that they never needed you in the first place. And once they begin rewriting the relationship, almost everything can be turned upside down. Your request for basic communication becomes neediness. Your request for respect becomes control. Your desire for consistency becomes demanding too much. Watch this carefully because this is one of the most painful parts of the cycle. They can take your strongest qualities and make you feel ashamed of them. If you're empathetic, they may call you too sensitive. If you're dependable, they may call you boring. If you're loyal, they may treat that loyalty as proof that you'll tolerate anything. Slowly, your strengths are redefined as weaknesses. This isn't simply a bad mood or a temporary change in attitude. It can become a deliberate pattern of tearing down your confidence. The goal, consciously or unconsciously, is to change how you see yourself. They may detach emotionally while still expecting access to your attention, your resources, your patience, and your emotional energy. You find yourself giving more while they give less. You explain more. You apologize more. You try harder. You carry conversations that should have been mutual. You repair damage you didn't create, and somehow, after all of that, you are still made to feel like the problem. That is the trap. The imbalance becomes so extreme that you begin measuring your worth by how well you can keep them satisfied. Or you start thinking, maybe if I explain it differently, maybe if I become more patient, maybe if I stop asking for so much, maybe if I love them harder, things will finally change. But notice what happens when you live inside that mindset. You slowly disappear from your own life. Your needs become secondary. Your feelings become negotiable. Your boundaries become something you apologize for having. And that is why you must pay attention to what happens next. Because the moment you stop trying to earn basic respect, the entire dynamic begins to change. The person who once depended on your constant emotional investment suddenly has less access to it. The source of reassurance becomes unavailable. The mirror stops reflecting the image they demanded. And this is where the deeper psychological consequences can begin to emerge. When someone has spent a long time depending on another person's attention, admiration, patience, or emotional availability, losing that source can create a very different internal experience from what they show publicly. They may appear completely unaffected. They may post as though they are happier than ever. They may immediately move towards someone new. They may act as though you never mattered. Do not confuse the performance with the reality. People can present confidence while privately experiencing frustration, emptiness, anger, or confusion. The outside story can say, "I don't care." The internal experience may be much more complicated. And this is why your healing cannot depend on seeing them suffer. Your freedom begins when you stop needing proof that they regret what they did. You do not need to watch their downfall to validate your pain. You do not need an apology to prove that you were mistreated. You do not need them to finally understand your value before you can recognize it yourself. Stay with this, because the next part is where many survivors finally understand why walking away can be so powerful. Once you stop feeding the cycle, you are no longer playing the role they assigned to you. You are becoming unavailable for the pattern itself. They are slowly teaching you to believe that you deserve the treatment you're receiving. By repeatedly attacking your sense of reality, they can make you question your own memories, your judgment, and eventually your worth. They want you to believe that your value has somehow become smaller. But the truth can be the complete opposite. Your confidence and independence can become so threatening to someone who needs control that they may try to weaken those qualities just to feel powerful again. They may attempt to confuse you because a healthy, confident version of you is much harder to manipulate. They need you uncertain, emotionally exhausted, and constantly searching for their approval. Because as long as you are waiting for the same person who created the wound to make you feel whole again, they remain at the center of your emotional world. But remember this powerful truth: they only appear enormous while you are forced down beneath them. The moment you rise, the illusion of their power begins to shrink. And this is where your story can start changing. The reason this betrayal feels so intensely personal is because it often targets the areas that matter most to you. A person who has learned your emotional weak points may know exactly where to push when conflict begins. Think back to the early stage of the relationship, when everything felt unusually safe and exciting. You opened up in ways you normally wouldn't. You shared childhood pain, private fears, old wounds, and insecurities that you had protected from almost everyone else. You believed you were creating emotional closeness. You believed those private details were being held with care. But later, those same vulnerabilities can become weapons in the wrong hands. When the relationship turns hostile, the attacks may not feel random. They can strike directly at the areas you once trusted them to protect. The secrets you shared during moments of closeness may suddenly become ammunition. The fears you confessed may be brought back during arguments. The sensitive parts of your personality may become targets. This is more than ordinary conflict or someone simply losing their temper. When this pattern becomes intentional, It can leave you feeling completely disarmed. You begin to believe that nowhere is emotionally safe because the person who knows you best also knows exactly what can hurt you most. And that kind of stress can affect your entire system. When the person who is supposed to be your safe place becomes the person you fear, your nervous system can remain stuck in a state of alertness. You start watching everything. You study their facial expressions. You notice the smallest change in their voice. You analyze the way they say hello. You wonder what a long silence means. You begin preparing for reactions before anything has even happened. Slowly, you become an expert at walking on eggshells. You change your words. You hide your opinions. You make yourself quieter. You adjust your personality just to prevent another explosion. But listen closely, because this part matters. You aren't simply keeping the peace anymore. You are slowly disappearing from your own life. You begin giving things up one piece at a time. Your hobbies become less important. Your friends hear from you less often. Your happiness becomes something you postpone. You stop doing things that once made you feel alive because you are constantly calculating whether they will cause another problem. You keep thinking that if you become patient enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, or careful enough, the relationship will finally become peaceful. But the target keeps moving. The standard keeps changing. No matter how much you adjust, there is always another problem, another accusation, another reason why you are supposedly failing. Because the real issue isn't that you aren't good enough. The issue is that control cannot be satisfied by perfection. The more you give, the more the system can demand. And eventually, you enter one of the most exhausting psychological states imaginable, cognitive dissonance. Your mind becomes a battlefield between two completely different versions of reality. One side remembers the person from the beginning, the attentive person, the affectionate person, the one who made you feel chosen, understood, and safe. Then you look at the person standing in front of you now, cold, dismissive, unpredictable, or maybe even deliberately cruel. Your brain struggles to understand how both versions could belong to the same person, so it searches desperately for an explanation. It tries to build a bridge between what you remember and what you are experiencing. And sadly, that bridge often becomes self-blame. You start telling yourself, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe if I had behaved differently, the old version of them would have returned. Suddenly, you become the detective investigating your own pain. You search through every conversation for the mistake that supposedly caused everything. You replay old arguments, you examine your words, you question your reactions. You look for some defect inside yourself that could explain why the relationship changed. But you need to hear this clearly. This mental battle does not mean you are weak. It means your mind is trying to create order from a deeply confusing experience. You are trying to use normal logic, empathy, and emotional responsibility to understand a dynamic that may be built around power, blame, and control. The safety you experienced at the beginning may have felt completely real to you. But if the relationship later became abusive or manipulative, that early closeness does not prove that you caused what followed. You are not failing because you couldn't make someone treat you with respect. You cannot love another person into emotional health. You cannot sacrifice enough of yourself to create accountability inside someone who refuses to take responsibility. And once you understand that, something inside you begins to shift. They didn't necessarily become a completely different person overnight. What may have changed is what they were willing to reveal. The image they carefully maintained became harder to sustain. The charm became inconsistent. The contradictions became harder to ignore. The more you saw, the harder it became for the original story to survive. And when you realize that their attacks are not proof of some hidden defect inside you, the mental confusion begins to lose its grip. You stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, why did I accept this for so long? That is a powerful turning point. You are not the problem that needs to be repaired. You are a person who needs to be restored to yourself. You gave away pieces of your confidence trying to preserve something that was hurting you. Now you get to take those pieces back. Stay with me, because the next part explains something that can be especially disturbing. It is what you may notice immediately after they hurt you. While you are sitting there shaken, trying to understand what just happened, they can appear completely unaffected. other. You may be crying, trembling, replaying every word, while they seem strangely calm. Sometimes they even look energized. They may act as though nothing serious happened, and that contrast can make you question reality all over again. You wonder, how can they hurt me this badly and then behave as if it meant nothing? In some unhealthy relationship dynamics, the other person's emotional reaction can become a source of reinforcement. Seeing you become distressed may give them a temporary feeling of power or control. When you cry, plead for clarity, explain yourself repeatedly, or desperately try to repair the situation, they may interpret your emotional reaction as evidence that they still have influence over you. In that distorted mindset, your pain becomes proof of their control. That can create a temporary emotional high. It may make them feel untouchable, superior, or victorious for a moment. This is why they can sit across from you and behave normally only minutes after an explosive argument. It doesn't necessarily mean they are emotionally stronger than you. It may mean they are disconnected from the emotional consequences of what they have done, or unwilling to face them. By minimizing the incident, denying what happened, or turning your reaction into the main issue, they can avoid confronting their own behavior. Instead of asking, "Why did I hurt this person?" the conversation becomes, "Why are you reacting this way?" Suddenly, your tears become the problem. Your anger becomes the problem. Your need for an explanation becomes the problem. If they can convince you that you're overreacting, too sensitive, or somehow unstable, they no longer have to examine their own actions. They get to escape accountability while leaving you carrying the emotional weight. But here is what you must remember. A temporary feeling of control is not genuine strength. It is not real victory. If someone needs another person's distress to feel powerful, that power is extremely fragile. It requires constant reinforcement. The moment the reaction disappears, the feeling can disappear with it. That can create a painful cycle where stronger reactions are needed to produce the same emotional reward. And this is where the story becomes much deeper. What they may not recognize in that moment is what they lose when they destroy a relationship with someone who genuinely cared for them. You weren't simply another person standing beside them. You may have provided patience, understanding, emotional consistency, encouragement, and stability. You may have offered reassurance even during moments when you were receiving very little in return. You gave them a reflection of themselves that was often kinder than the one they could create alone. When they push that person away, they lose access to that source of stability. They may believe another person can immediately replace you. They may find someone new. They may look happier. They may appear completely unaffected. From the outside, it can seem like they simply moved on. But human relationships are not interchangeable machines. A new person does not automatically recreate years of trust, patience, shared history, and emotional investment. And this is the part you should never forget. Their ability to replace your presence does not determine your value. You do not need to compete with whoever comes next. You do not need to watch what happens to them. Your job is not to become unforgettable to someone who hurt you. Your job is to become fully present in your own life again. That is where your real power begins.